So our last speaker, Silja Behre, who received her PhD in history from Bielefeld University in Paris. Her work focuses on questions of transnational intellectual history, the sociology and theory of memory studies, and the relations between Israel and the German literary field. One of her recent works in the biography is the biography, of Ephraim Kishon, published last year. And together with Irena O. Ben David and Sharon Livne, she has just finished studies on the early academic relations between Germany and Israel, and her intellectual biography of the German-Israeli religious scholar Jonathan Bloch will be published next year. Please.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for the two presentations. I have to make it a bit higher. And thank you for presenting Yehuda Amichai. We will meet him again soon, because he also plays a role today in my presentation on turning the page between Germany and Israel. Maybe you heard that this year the Israeli side had the idea to have a shared appearance on the Frankfurt Book Fair together with Germany on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the German-Israeli relations. And this idea was put down or denied by the German side. And this is just another new chapter on German-Israeli book relations that I want to focus on today. And on the question if turning the page is ever possible. Anyway, I love books and I love book people, and this is how I came to this project. That in the last years I had the chance or the luck to work on various projects, biographical projects, mainly on 4 men, old white men that I like very much. And you might know them, and I want to introduce them today. So, first we have Kurt Wormann. He was the director of the what is today the National Library in Jerusalem between 1948 and 1968, and he was born in Berlin in 1900, and he worked as a librarian in Berlin-Kreuzberg during the Weimar Republic, and then he had to emigrate. He was a social democrat, very, very invested in adult education, public libraries, and so on. And he emigrated. You can hear me? Yes. And he emigrated in 1934, actually, and he got soon invested in the circles of German Jewish intellectuals. He became the director of the Jewish National and University Library, what was the name then. And he was a very calm man, very educated, and a great networker. We will come back to him. So this is Kurt. And then we have Johannan Bloch. You might know the old man, the elderly man on the right side. This is Martin Buber, of course. On the left side you have Johannan Bloch, born in 1919 in Berlin to a revisionist Zionist family. His aunt was the famous Grete Bloch, who made the connection between Kafka and Felice Bauer. So he emigrated as a young boy, like 13 years, with his family. And in the 50s he came back to Berlin, and he founded the German-Israeli study groups. And recently you might have heard about it. Jonas Hahn, he published a beautiful book about the history of the German-Israeli study groups at Free University in Berlin. And actually it was the idea of Johannan Bloch. And I came to his archives, I wrote a biography on him, and he was like a kind of academic troublemaker. They got him a post finally in Beersheba, and he died relatively young at age 60, but also a very fascinating person. And then we have Moshe Yaakov Ben Gavriel, who you might know, who was born Eugen Höflich in Vienna, and who came in the 20s to the then British Mandate of Palestine, became a writer, and he published novels like inspired by quite an Orientalist view of the land here, and he was very successful also after the Shoah in West Germany. He was like one of the first Israelis to have a very big success on the West German book market. And then we have Ephraim Kishon, who you know for sure, not German Jewish, but Central European, Hungarian Jewish, who was immigrated to Israel in 1949, who became very popular journalist and playwright. But his biggest success was in Germany, in West Germany actually. He sold 34 million copies of books only there. And so we have like these four very different personalities, very different men. And I was working on them on different times, biographical research, but I didn't want to contain myself on questions of Jewish identity and how like this whole immigration story and establish themselves somewhere else. And then I realized that in all of their archives, and there's one question that comes up all the time, like who is legitimate to speak about the Israeli issue or Jewish issue in Germany and with the German public? That connects all these different men, writers, authors, librarians. And then I had the idea to connect all these biographies into a larger question, like how do book people make politics? Do they make politics at all? Is this a political thing? And while researching their biographies, I realized two things. Actually, the first thing is that the current historiography of German-Israeli relations is like characterized by a kind of division of labor. Like you have on one side the very traditional political history of diplomatic relations that follows a kind of master narrative, like of growing reconciliation. We first had like cultural relations with students, and then the diplomatic relations in 1965, and it's a process of normalization. Okay, it got some critique, this term, but it's still used very often. It's a success story and so on. And the second thing I realized is all these conflicts and concurrences within these writers' work, within the German book market and among themselves, among each other, actually. And so I was thinking if I take another perspective on these German Israelis, not from a traditional political, historical point of view, to look at the state level, but to understand the political as a broader thing. Like there's not political and cultural history, like intellectual history and then political history, but to combine it because they are linked to each other. Like some books, for example, Carol Fink, she wrote a beautiful story about the German-Israeli relations within the context of the Cold War. And of course, Günter Grass, he visited Israel and so on, but it's like a side story. And in my perspective, a perspective that is based on a broader conception of the political, inspired by mainly the field theory of Pierre Bourdieu, is that there's the political is like the struggle for different perceptions of the world. And this is the political thing. And this connects the state level to the cultural field. And so I tried to combine all these biographies of these men who were struggling to establish themselves, who wanted to be successful and have readers and everything. And so what did I see actually? All these four, they shaped the early German-Israeli relations after the war, and not always in a way that attracted public attention, and not necessarily motivated by an idea of reconciliation, not at all, but they characterized these first years of German-Israeli relations before 1965. And they were always caught between like the official state policy on both sides and the kind of non-governmental cultural policies. So let's first have a short look at the post-war career of Moshe Yaakov Ben Gavriel. For instance, he published in 1956 this book Kumsitz, Geschichten aus der Wüste. So he gained his German audience with stories of the early Israeli statehood, like really rooted in the Levante, and he had great success, thousands of copies sold. And he provided a specific image of Israel, like the land in the desert and quite oriental. And he was not only a writer of novels, but he was also the first Israeli, or the first journalist from the pre-state Israel, who covered Israeli topics for the German-speaking press in 1945. He was appointed correspondent. And in 1951, he was the first Israeli writer to lecture from his works in Germany. So he was invited by the Gesellschaft für christlich-jüdische Zusammenarbeit. And this shows that there was a demand from the German side, Christian motivated, to invite writers from Israel. And for Ben Gabriel, it was crucial because he only wrote in German, he never wrote in Hebrew. So he needed the German audience. It was like also his livelihood. And the German audience had these expectations from him how to write about the Levante. And he delivered, and he was quite successful. He became like one of the rivals of Ephraim Kishon. For example, like these Kumsit stories, they cover the first years of Israeli statehood. And 5 years later, in 1961, when Look Back, Mrs. Lot by Ephraim Kishon is translated into German, it's also about these first years of Israeli statehood. So both covered these topics because there was like an interest, fascination for Israel within the German public. And the German public discovered, not everybody, but these Christian-motivated reconciliation groups discovered humor and Jewish humor as an instrument for reconciliation. So this is what made also his success and Ephraim Kishon's success. Then later it created tensions between Kishon and Ben Gabriel, because Ben Gabriel, he wrote a book review on Kishon's first German book in 1961, and he destroyed it. Like, it's not Jewish humor, it's not even Israeli humor, it's not even Tel Avivi humor. It's like he really defended its position. And this is what I want to put forward, like these German-Israeli cultural relations and relations in general, they are a history of constant conflict. Who is legitimate to speak about Israel? And it's until today, within, be it the Israelis in Germany who speak up or criticize Israel, be it the Israeli writers and the expectations from a German public. So, and Kishon actually, he became like, he was criticized by Ben Gabriel, but already Kishon, he didn't have this idea, he didn't need the German public. But his translator Friedrich Thorberg from Vienna, he had the idea, and we have to have a focus on these translations, or translators in general and publishers, he had the idea to convey an image of Israel that is normalized. Like Israel is a normal country, and Israelis as normal people that could live in Stuttgart. And this was Kishon's success story in Germany, this framing by Thorberg as a Kishon for Germans. And both were so popular because of this German demand, but there were also German expectations on how writers should write about Israel, and especially Jewish writers, because when Thorberg, he created like a Kishon light for the German public, not too sharp, not too controversial. And this depoliticized Kishon became so popular. And when Kishon raised his voice for Israeli purposes after 1967, the West German feuilleton was like irritated, like how can he be political suddenly, and like all his career was put into question. And so we have also to see these struggles that go until today, what the German public expects from Jewish or Israeli writers, and what they want them to write, and who's successful and who not. And then we have to see in these fields the positions that these people occupy. Like Ephraim Kishon, Ben Gabriel, they were like writers, freelance writers in Israel, and then they had also a German audience. And then we have librarians like Kurt Wormann. he held an official position as a director of the library, and he represented Israel abroad. And he was very invested to modernize the public library system of Israel. He went to the United States to learn about the new systems of librarianship, and he implemented these systems in Israel. And he had early contacts with German librarians, and he criticized their way of commemorating the Jewish colleagues that got killed in the Shoah. And he implemented a kind of practice of memory of German librarians after the Shoah. And he also was very invested with Salo Baron and Hannah Arendt in the Jewish cultural reconstruction. And in this sense, he was like in these gray zones between cultural diplomacy and state interest. And so when it came to the question if the JCR, not only the JCR, but also official Israeli delegations should work with German reconciliation initiative, Worman was for the collaboration with the German side, while the Israeli Ministry for Foreign Affairs gave its veto. And Worman was very disappointed, and from the United States he wrote to his colleague in Jerusalem, "All our friends here believe that we can use the movement Friede mit Israel, a German initiative, which is especially strong in academic circles, for our endeavors to get valuable books from German collections. Therefore, I was very disappointed to hear during the past days that our foreign ministry is opposed to negotiations with this organization. We shall have to do it in the name of Jewish cultural reconstruction." So this gave already also more freedom to these initiatives to act beyond the state level. And of course, in Jerusalem, Kurt Worman, he was in contact with Martin Buber and Ernst Siemener and all these established German Jewish intellectuals. And Buber is also somebody who became, like in post-war Germany, like a symbolic figure for reconciliation with his philosophy of dialogue. And the Germans wanted to have Buber in Germany, and then he came 2 years later after he got the Peace Prize of the German book trade. And this fascination for Buber is also a thing. The Germans adopted this idea of dialogue. They implemented it on this German-Jewish, German-Israeli relation. And after 1967, they incorporated the Palestinian side. So they saw, some German intellectuals saw that they are now entitled to guide the dialogue between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And one of the critics of this dialogical thinking in Buberian terms was Yochanan Bloch. Where is he? He was a Buber scholar, and he was sent to Germany, first to Europe, then to Germany by Buber. And Buber was like his mentor, but he became critic of this thinking of reconciliation. He founded the German-Israeli study groups in Berlin at Free University in 1957. And at this time there was no Israeli embassy, of course, but this Köln, Israel Mission in Köln, you might know. And the Israel Mission in Köln saw the work of the German-Israeli study groups as an opportunity to interest young non-Jewish Germans in Israel. So they supported the work of the study group that Bloch had just founded. But Bloch, however, his involvement was criticized by the Köln Mission, by the Israel Mission in Köln, because Bloch, he presented himself in Germany like as an Israeli, and he was perceived as a spokesperson for Israel. He acted like an informal diplomat, and this caused criticism among the staff of the Israel Mission in Köln. And furthermore, 5 more minutes. Furthermore, Bloch, he was a Zionist in the revisionist sense of the term, so he marginalized himself completely. And later he went back to Israel, but these politics of Israeli politics, how they play in these German circles, they are really relevant, and also until today, I think. However, the staff of the Israel Mission in Köln was d'accord with Bloch, because Bloch wanted to found this study group on Israel because he was so unhappy with the way that Israel was covered in the German press. And he criticized especially Ben Gavriel for putting up an image of Israel that is not enough Zionist and not of the modern Israel and so on. And the staff of the Israel Mission in Köln said, yeah, we agree and you are right, but we don't have the means to counter this. And then Bloch said, okay, you don't have the means, but I do it. And he founded the study group and he made his own Asbara in Berlin. So I already spoke about Kishon in the way that he became more political after 1967, and then his career went like, he got more critics from the German left, etc. And people were always asking, why do you write about Kishon? Because who's interested in Kishon anyway? And it's popular literature, and it's not high literature and everything. But the thing is, Kishon, his German career is like symptomatic for the way that Israeli literature is perceived in Germany until today. Like that you connect literary criticism with political positioning. And for example, after 1967, some journalists wrote about Kishon that war corrupts prose, and even where people must wage war in order to survive, it is clear that noble sentiments produce bad literature, unfortunately also in the case of Israel, and unfortunately also in the case of Ephraim Kishon. But then, from 1974 on, the same journalist was a bit more nice, and he said his humor diminished, that Kishon had found himself again after his humor had diminished and his patriotism had increased. Like the literary scholar Cyril Aslanov, he said that there is no reception of Israeli literature that is not connected to the political positioning of the authors. And this is something that I would like to investigate further on other cases, how these political questions are combined with literary criticism. And of course, Kishon, he served like as a trailblazer for other Israeli authors. And here I come back to Yehuda Amichai, who got popular in Germany, West Germany, from the 80s on. And when he was asked about Kishon, he said like that he pointed out that it was very important to himself that Kishon would not be regarded in Germany as the unqualified representative of literary Israel. So they wanted to give a counter image. So we have all the time these conflicts: who is allowed to speak on Israel's behalf, who gives what image of Israel, and so on. And this is something that creates like a continuation from the 50s until today, and it's like in the heart of the German Jewish and German Israeli relations. And this is so fascinating because they're all so different, and it's a story from 60 years ago, but it stayed quite the same actually. So this is what I wanted to present you today. Thank you very much. And I'm very curious about what you have to say. And if you have any idea what archives to look at, let me know.